I'm Chris Stevenson, and this video is the first in a 5-part series on mechanics and character creation in Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition. Now, for me, Vampire the Masquerade is a game about storytelling first and mechanics second. But mechanics matter too. It's one thing to create a character who isn't combat capable because that's your concept. It's another thing to create a character who isn't combat capable even though you wanted them to be. And all of the things being equal, I think most players want to be able to pull off awesome things at some point, even in a Chronicle that is mostly drenched in personal horror. And it's a letdown to realize that the array of dots on your character sheet won't let you do that. So what I'm going to talk about in this series of videos is not how to come up with a character concept. What I am going to talk about is how to make sure that your character concept is embodied by the mechanical information you put on your character sheet. In the second video of this series, I'm going to talk about attributes. In the third video, I will talk about skills. In the fourth video, I will talk about disciplines. And in the fifth and final video, I will talk about advantages and disadvantages. But in this video, I'm going to touch on a few high-level suggestions when putting together your character. But first, let me note, big point, and this is for all of the videos, when you are listening to this video, the other videos, keep in mind that every storyteller is different. Different storytellers may focus on different aspects of the play experience, require roles at different times, or just toss some rules altogether. In fact, in just a minute, you're going to hear me suggest that your storyteller should change part of the rules as written. So, if your storyteller is going to make you roll technology every single time you want to use your phone, you probably want to put some dots in that. If your storyteller wants you to roll drive every single time you get in a car, you're probably going to want to put some dots in that. If your storyteller never makes you roll a social skill, maybe all of a sudden that's less of an emphasis. But 3 high-level points that I wanted to make in this introductory video. First, the V5 rules as written set difficulties very, very high. The quote-unquote normal difficulty of 3 requires that you be rolling 6 dice to have an even chance of success. Personally, I would suggest that your storyteller lower the difficulties across the board, and I've seen a lot of storytellers do that. But that's out of your hands if you're the player. So you'll have to keep that difficulty in mind. And there are a few things you can do to adjust. During character creation, keep in mind that small dice pools will be very weak during play. 2 in an attribute, an average human, plus 1 in a skill, basic knowledge, translates to 3 dice, which means about a 12.5% chance of success on a difficulty 3 roll, before you factor in criticals and mesi-criticals and willpower. Now, willpower is very important. Don't be afraid to spend it for rerolls, or, if your storyteller allows, spend it for success at a cost. I mean, unless your storyteller actually uses these social combat damage rules, in which case you might need to hang on for dear life to every point of willpower you've got. But willpower doesn't get you very far on these small dice pools. Getting to re-roll 3 dice has a much bigger impact when you can roll 6 than re-roll 3 failures to try to pick up a second or third success. When you only have 3 dice, even spending willpower is going to give you a coin flip at best. And hunger makes all of that worse because the hunger dice fill up your pool faster. They can't be re-rolled with willpower, increase the chances of a bestial failure, and make any possible critical a messy one. When you're rolling nothing but 3 hunger dice, it's kind of scary to even try anything. Again, the point of all that scary talk I'm saying is that 1, your storyteller should reduce the difficulties a little bit. You really should have better odds of succeeding on a generically challenged roll. But also, during character creation, you need to be very cautious about what kind of mileage you'll actually get out of having just one dot in a lot of skills. I have a personal preference for spreading dots around liberally, having a little bit of competence in a lot of topics, but that doesn't matter much in V5. 2 dice, 3 dice, you're still doomed. So you probably want to avoid the jack of all trades skill spread option, the one that gives you 1 dot in a lot of things. It's really just a recipe for disaster. Second big point, combat. Some vampire games have a lot of combat, and some don't have very much. But combat is one place where you know that dice will be rolled. Some storytellers will have you roll a lot of dice in social situations, while others will let you go through an entire Elysium without a single roll. But I've never met a storyteller who will let you go through a running gun battle without chucking some dice. When looking at combat, keep in mind that there are no half measures in V5. There isn't a lot of trading blows where both sides get worn down. You're rolling, your foe is rolling, and whoever wins that roll won't take any damage at all. If you can't win that opposed conflict roll, nothing else really matters. Of particular note in this are that out of all those disciplines you might take, potence, fortitude, protean, celerity, none of them will help you hit in the first place. Hitting is all about attributes and skills. Every single combat roll is a straight attribute plus skill. One side effect of this is that vampires aren't much better at winning conflict rolls than humans are. Sure, a vampire has a lot more survivability if they get hit, but a vampire throwing 3 dice in a combat pool is going to be taken down hard by a mortal with actual combat chops throwing 6 dice. You can't experience the personal horror of the slow loss of humanity if you're too busy experiencing the personal embarrassment of getting beaten up by every mortal passerby you try to feed off of. V5 combat is quick and dirty, and if your character is notably outclassed by your opponent, it's going to end very quickly. So, if you want your character to be able to succeed in combat, I would suggest a real investment in appropriate skills and attributes. Just throwing a single dot in Brawl isn't going to help much. When you're doing this, keep in mind that the standard conflict rolls are Strength plus Brawl for fists, teeth, and the like, Dexterity plus Melee for one-handed melee weapons, Strength plus Melee for two-handed melee weapons, or Composure plus Firearms for, firearms. If you want your character to be combat capable, make sure to pick one of these and be decent at it. Strength plus Brawl is a nice default because it can be used for feeding. The fact that Firearms is usually based off of Composure can give more socially oriented characters something to do without piling dots into physical attributes. Note that nothing about dodging was on that list. Dodging is generally a poor tactic in combat. Dodging just replaces your attack dice pool with the Dexterity plus Athletics pool. You make the same opposed check, but you can only avoid losing. You can't actually win. Unless your Dexterity plus Athletics roll is notably better than the combat roll, in most circumstances you may as well try to hit back. Note that all of this goes out of the window in many on-one fights. The rules for fighting against multiple opponents are punishing for the character fighting alone, because there are no static difficulties and because a single combatant can't usually meaningfully hit back against 4 combatants, even weaker attackers can get hits in. Third big point, predator pools. Feeding is important in V5, as it always has been in Vampire. The need to consume the blood of others is part of the inherent horror of the game. You shouldn't be bogged down in-game with every feeding, but it's going to come up. Even the most satiated of vampires is only a few bad rouse checks away from starving. you're going to need to be able to make hunting rolls, especially because, again, the baseline difficulties for rolls are so high. I suggest making sure you've got at least one hunting pool that's a big one. It is no fun at all for your character to be hungry, to fail your hunting roll, and then just have nothing, and you and the storyteller just kind of end up staring at each other across the table. The easiest hunting rolls are difficulty 2. So if you've got a 4 dice pool, then even the easiest hunt is a 50-50 shot. And you're probably hungry, so willpower isn't going to help. Difficulty 3 or 4 might be more likely if you don't have time to visit the rack. So again, the way that these difficulties work out mathematically in V5 means that you need solid dice pools that are going to let you reliably succeed at these standard hunting rolls. The most common need to eat rolls are probably the alley cat style, which is taking blood by force, Sandman, which is breaking and entering, and Siren, which is taking blood by seduction. Default alley cat roll is strength plus brawl, Sandman is dexterity plus stealth, Siren is charisma plus subterfuge. Be good at rolling at least one of these. Or maybe composure plus animal ken if your character is willing to stoop to that. Other predator styles are hard to do on the fly. Most vampires can't use standard blood bags because they don't have iron gullet. Most vampires don't have a family groomed. Most vampires don't have a blood cult ready to go, and so on and so forth. In considering hunting, remember that feeding style isn't something that is locked in. Picking Siren or Alley Cat as your predator style during character creation does not mean that your character is bound to only feed that way. It's just how they fed most in the past, and it tends to give them the mechanical tools to feed that way in the future. This is particularly noteworthy for the Alley Cat predator type. Even if your character is capable of feeding by force and does so on a regular basis, you might not want Alley Cat as your predator type at character creation. Choosing Alley Cat costs a point of humanity and gets you back a couple of extra advantage dots. In conceptual terms, a dot of humanity is the most valuable thing on your character sheet. And it's all the more precious because character creation is the only time that your character will have humanity this high. It's all downhill from here. Not only is a spiraling loss of humanity the general course of play for Vampire, but the experience point cost to increase humanity is prohibitively high, so it's unlikely to be raised even if your character is the most self-restrained vampire in history. So be careful about choosing Alley Cat during character creation. On the other hand, it's hard to take advantage of the humanity increasing predator types unless they really line up with your character concept. The feeding flaws they come with, prey exclusion, non-consenting for the consensualist, or vegan for the farmer, pretty much define that aspect of the character. Additionally, when picking which specialty you're taking from your predator type, give serious consideration to the one that works with your likely predator pool. So, for example, a Sandman can take a specialty in medicine and aesthetics, which has very, very, very little application. Or they can take a specialty in stealth break-in, which they will use basically every time they roll their standard predator style. Finally, Chronicle Tenets. Keep your Chronicle Tenets in mind when you're thinking about your character's makeup, because some Chronicle Tenets can impact the utility of certain powers. For example, in the V5 core book, there is a sample Chronicle Tenet of, quote, act like a person, not a beast, end quote. The book explains that this tenet would be violated when a character does something, quote, clearly inhuman, such as surviving horrible physical trauma, end quote. This could have a significant impact on the fortitude discipline, which is all about surviving horrible physical trauma. That doesn't mean that taking a lot of fortitude and taking a lot of stains in such a chronicle is wrong in some sense. But if you don't want your character to take a lot of stains, then you probably don't want to take a lot of fortitude, because you're probably going to feel bad that you're sitting here with these dots on your character sheets that you just don't want to use. To recap, 1. Know your storyteller. 2. In Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition, difficulties are unforgiving. Make sure you have big dice pools for the things you want to be effective at. 3. Combat is all or nothing, and disciplines don't help win combat rolls. So if you want to be combat capable, make sure you have a good combat dice pool. 4. Make sure your usual predator pool has lots of dice in it, because not being able to feed can suck all of the fun out of a session. Combining points 3 and 4 together, give some serious thought to whether your character can afford to be bad at Strength plus Brawl. A good Strength plus Brawl roll means that your character will have something to do in combat, and means that when desperate, your character will have a way to feed. Those are 2 things that you likely want to be able to do. Finally, Chronicle tenets, give some thought to how the individual tenets in your chronicle might impact your ability to use some of the dots on your sheet. That's it for this first out of 5 videos on mechanics and character creation in Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition. Keep an eye out for the later videos in the series, which will cover attributes, skills, disciplines, and advantages and disadvantages. I hope you found this useful. If you have, please feel free to like or subscribe below.